Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Rose to the Ceilings podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Women's History Month.
Yeah, March is a very exciting month for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. For a lot of people, it is tax month because it's a quarter, and the year split up into 12 months, and then divided by four is three. So March is the end of the first quarter. So that's exciting. But what also is exciting is the fact that March, as Isabel said, is Women's History Month. So we are going to take today's episode to kind of reflect back on not only what has happened this year as kind of a win for feminism, but what's happened specifically in this month that's meant to try to bring awareness to issues.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about March. So, the first thing we have is the Paralympic sports. And actually, in March, every International Women's Day, they announce a few women who do Paralympics that are really inspiring, and the International Paralympic Organization kind of spotlights them. And I think that's really cool. And I think that we should spotlight Paralympic sports. I think definitely the discrimination against both women and people with disabilities in
Mm-hmm.
sports, especially, is really big. So it's definitely something we want to talk about. I did want to mention actually the pay equity for gender and disability. We talked about gender before, but
Mm.
I did find out that for the Paralympics, if you win a gold medal, you get awarded with $20,000. Now, if you win the Olympics and get a gold medal, you get $37,500. Now, sports is kind of an interesting one, right? Because like you know a lot about this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
About the pay gap in sports, uh, we
About
did
why
an
people
episode.
watch sports? Why
Yeah,
what
we
makes
did an
sports
episode
interesting?
on this really early on, actually, in our podcast career. People did not like it. People were very upset. But I think it's because a lot of people view the sports pay gap as a very black and white issue, as these people view male sports more. Male sports get paid more because all in all, it is an entertainment industry, right? I can see where they're coming from, where it's like the more viewed actors get paid more. Again, more viewed athletes get paid more. That's true. We're not saying that's wrong, but you need to dig a bit deeper than that, right? You can't stop at that. You have to think first of all, why? Like you always have to ask yourself why, right? You can't just stick to it. You can't be like, okay, why do people watch the regular Olympics more than the Paralympics? Because it's more interesting. Why? Why is it more interesting to people? Is this a culture that we've already developed in society where we just it's like we grow up watching the Olympics? Is it a thing with how it's promoted? Is it a thing with how people view it? You have to be questioning why. To do that, to address the actual issues, so we can actually balance the pay gap at a more fair advantage instead of just being like, oh, let's just give them more money, because then people get mad. So I think what you brought up is really interesting because this doesn't just apply to, like you said, men and women, but it applies to all marginalized people everywhere. Which what feminism is. That's what feminism really is about.
Yeah, for sure. It's about addressing the discrimination for everybody, not just women. That's totally right. And yeah, that's definitely what I wanted you to touch upon because I know I really like your viewpoint on that it really is an entertainment industry,
Hmm.
and that I think the reasons people watch sports, a bunch of
Hmm.
different cultural reasons, is kind of interesting because it's not your typical job. These
That's
people make so much money from playing a game and having people watch them. So it's definitely interesting how people who are marginalized get paid less for it.
mm. And I think again, this topic seems black and white, but it isn't. You got to go into the grassroots. You got to go into you got to go back in time. You got to do a bit more research on it to speak on it. Um, but no, that's really interesting, and I'm glad that March has brought awareness to this. What else in March? The Grammys. Wait, the Oscars. Wait, hold on. I think they were both in March. Award season. Award season is in March. Mainly the Oscars, which I will be talking about. But throughout the past year, we've seen a lot of films that do highlight women. Specifically, a big one that hit the media was Barbie. Barbie has a special place in our hearts. We did an episode on this. We did a TikTok on this. This might be our most viewed content to this day. But Barbie did do a lot. It has a lot of criticism for not going in depth enough, for being very shallow. I can understand that, right? It's very much like guys, women. suffer and they shouldn't. And it is shallow at that point. But at the same time, it's a movie to get people who don't know anything about feminism into it. So I think for that they did a really good job. And the Oscars seemed to agree because they got 8 nominations for it. One of whom was America Ferrera, which is very important because we love talking about
Definitely.
intersectional feminism on this channel, on this podcast, because we acknowledge that it is a lot harder for women in all industries to succeed if they are women of color. So seeing her get nominated and to get her recognized was really important, and it does show people that it is possible, especially since America has been in the industry for so long. Like, she's been acting, and to finally see her get recognized is pretty sick. And then I don't know if this is true or not, but I did also see
Okay.
people say that both America and um, Margot Robbie were at the Oscars, but they did let America, well, their stylist or whatever, shine and wear the Barbie pink because she was the one with the nomination. And Margot still like popped off in her black dress. I think it was pretty nice that they pointed out that they gave America the Barbie pink there. Um, Following up on the women of color in the Oscar nominations, Danielle Brooks was also nominated for Best Supporting Actress for The Color Purple. This is the only nomination the film got, which was a little surprising to me. But again, it is good to see women of color being nominated, especially for media depicting the struggles of women of color. So that was really neat to see.
Yeah, Color Purple is definitely a classic. And I like what you said too about how, on the surface, to a lot of people, Barbie might seem shallow to them and have kind of a shallow message
Mm-hmm.
to them. But it's definitely important to touch on that media means different things to
Mm-hmm.
all types of people, which is something we do with our podcast and something Women's History Month does, right? It
Mm-hmm.
brings attention to these pieces of media, to these different
Mm-hmm.
people, and what it means depends on you.
Mm-hmm. Like, yes, it might seem shallow to you if you already know a lot about feminism and you are open minded, but to a lot of people, this is the first time they're hearing a woman on the big stage say that they are at a disadvantage. This is one of the first times the Oscars given out a nominations to a movie that so clearly said, hey, women are at a disadvantage. So while it might not seem like it to you, Barbie did do a big step in making feminism more accessible, especially to the younger generation. So I'm glad that they did get a few nominees. And again, The Color Purple, we mentioned this insane movie, deserved the nomination, deserved more. But again, Danielle Brooks, good call.
Yeah, love it. It definitely inspires me. And another thing that inspires me is the Mexico protest on International Women's Day.
Good transition.
I know, thank you, thank you. Um, so, for those who don't know, the protest in Mexico happened on March 8th, and they were on purple, which is the color for Women's History Month. And the reason they did this is because of the terrible treatment of women in Mexico. Now, if you don't know, it has a very high rate of violence against women and those that are of gender nonconforming. And in 2019, there was actually a statistic taken that said 77% of women in Mexico feel unsafe just walking the streets or in their own home. And that is terrible. Nobody should have to feel that way. And another thing is that the justice system isn't accessible. So if you feel unsafe, but you have nobody to go to, or the people that you're supposed to go to, like the police, have danger of being corrupt, then what are you supposed to do? You're stuck.
Hmm. I saw this in the news and it was like mind-boggling because like it I think the number is like 180,000. That's 180,000 people in Mexico City in this huge area, huge densely populated area, and it's 180,000 women marching and saying like, "Hey, we're sick of this treatment. We're not going to be silenced about it. You got to listen to us now because we're on the news because there's so many of us." And I think that's just an impactful like solidarity type of thing. And the numbers are crazy high for almost all of these stats. And I feel like bringing awareness, we talk a lot about this, but bringing awareness is really the first step because I had no idea how high some of these numbers were. Um, but some of their acts of protest, like I did one thing in particular was I read that a group of women had buckets of purple paint next to them, and they were standing there, and they had a sign that said like, "Paint me," if you ever felt like if you've ever been like abused. And there was like just huge lines of women like just lining up, waiting to like take the paintbrush and just do like one stroke. And I'm like, that's it just blows my mind. So I just think that's such an impactful protest on Women's Day.
It goes back to even the suffrage movement, right? Like it reminds me of
Mm,
that woman making noise. That's how we get somewhere. Yeah,
hmm.
I love it.
Speaking of getting somewhere, we're not real today. But there sometimes there is a lot of what are they? What's the opposite of hope? Like unhope, or there's a lot of unhope, or you feel like, damn, nothing I do is gonna ever cause change. Nothing I do is ever gonna bring feminism to like a systemic awareness level. But that's actually not true, and I was shocked to hear this. But the UN, um, the governor, attorney general, he has a title. He's in charge. He's a big deal. Um, Addressed the opening of the Commission on the Status of Women, part of the UN, and he basically talked a lot about how, here's the quote, in conflict zones around the globe, women and girls are suffering most from wars waged by men. I think that's such a crazy powerful statement. He goes on to talk about how um, it 2/3 of the people killed by Israel's offenses in Gaza are women and girls. About how in Afghanistan, the Taliban has issued a lot of like more than 50 laws that suppress women and girls' rights. In Sudan, the women that have been like raped and sexually abused has skyrocketed, and he like hammers it home that these are wars waged by men, and these are women that are the mostly affected by them. We've known this. These statistics happen on everywhere. This is not, well, for most people this has already been like aware, but to have someone who's in a position of power at the United Nations address the council, address the world, and admit this with no trying to cover it up, just blatantly talking about how it is the women suffering the most from these wars, is so impactful. And I think that this is what does lead to change eventually, is having someone in power recognize this. And we talk a lot about how important male allies are too. And I think this just goes to show that.
For sure. I love that so much, especially because so many politicians, oh, maybe I can't say that, but we know so many politicians try to cover up mistakes that are being
Mm,
made in the world, right? And are always thinking so strategically, almost. And I love that he's just getting up there and saying
hmm.
facts of what's happening right now, and definitely having somebody in a position of power, like you said, saying that has a different kind of power, and it's recognizing those women, those children who have been suffering, and it's the type of recognition that we need right now.
I also like that he did mention that feminism isn't just in extreme situations, it's also in, because a lot of people feel who are in those countries in an active war zone don't feel like they're involved at all in feminism. But he goes to say again, like even in tech, even in AI right now, as the AI development, the glass ceiling, podcast reference, is so just thick for women. And he says, overwhelmingly male dominated financial institutions need to dismantle the structural barriers that are backing women from leadership roles. When I read that, I was like, that could have been a podcast quote. We could have said that. So I think it's so good. And he emphasizes this, and he emphasized that in tech and a lot of these industries, women don't have the funding and they don't have the investment. And his whole call to action was, we need to start investing in our women and girls to decrease this gap, to break that glass ceiling. And he also says that, like, his quote was that women lead to peace, to call for funding and new policies to boost women's participation. And I just think that's, again, I like that he's addressing that this is an issue in every industry. We try to talk about this. This isn't just a war issue. This isn't something that you're not involved in. You are, everyone is involved in the patriarchy at some level.
Yeah, I like that he's not just preaching either. He has a stance on it. He has something he wants to take action on, and definitely my own opinion, I do agree that it starts from the young women and girls, right? If we want to
Mm.
make change, we need to start from the new generation. It's great.
That's why they should watch the podcast.
Speaking of the new generation, let's talk about babies.
Okay.
Okay, so abortion rights have been a big theme the past year, but for March,
Roe v. Wade. Sorry.
France is enshrining abortion rights in their constitution, which is amazing. Now, women already had abortion rights since 1974 in France.
Oh.
So it's not like it's been a problem for France, right? Women already had this right. It's more of them, in my opinion, seeing America making all this noise against
Mm,
abortion and making abortion illegal that they want to say, hey, that's not right.
mm,
Our women in France will not have that fear. We won't allow that. And
mm.
America needs to check that out.
I think like what you meant, even if it's just like kind of like a I'm at a loss for words. You know how like the queen is still no, the king is kind of the leader of Canada, but not really. It's just like a statement. I feel like that's what you're trying to say they're making, and I think it is impactful because they're a big country. It's not like France is some like random small country in the middle of nowhere, right? But they're a big country. 1974 is crazy. Okay, back then, what Canada was, I don't even know what Canada was doing. I don't know what the states were even doing back then. They were not doing good. But having abortion rights since then, and now putting them in the Constitution and having them solidified and like probably unchanged from now on is gonna do more for them, bro. And I think they are taking a step in the right direction. And I hope everyone does follow up.
Yeah, France is arguably where feminism started because of the French Revolution and Enlightenment. So I think it's good that it's kind of going full circle. They're doing it again. It's great.
I know that this will be in the history books one day, and I think that's pretty cool. I think they should put us down as a source. um, about abortion, not my next point, but Olivia Rodrigo is on tour right now. She's doing her Guts World Tour. I still haven't gotten tickets. If anyone's watching this and is selling Vancouver tickets, please hit me up. But she's been doing this thing where she has been putting money towards different charities using her like good for you kind of thing. And I saw someone post that at one of her concerts, she was giving out Plan B for free to encourage women's reproductive rights. I think that's pretty sick. And a lot of people were saying like, but aren't most of her viewers children? And I was like, who do you think needs their reproductive rights protected the most? So I think that's pretty cool. And I think a lot of people are trying to help fight against the United States backwards action. I don't know how to transition into this one, but I don't know how to transition into our last point that happened in March. But I saw an article talking about seaweed tampons. Basically, a big issue for a while now that people have been trying to solve is that menstrual products, first of all, still really expensive, but also not great for the environment. Because if you look at a tampon, it's like the cotton is not produced very like sustainably. The applicator is plastic. The wrapping is plastic. A lot of it is just plastic and not reusable. And a lot of women have noticed this and like, I kind of want alternatives because I, first of all, need an alternative because I want to live longer than 2030. So I need something sustainable. Um, so this German startup named Wild have started to make biodegradable tampons out of seaweed. So they were founded in 2021 and they call it the Kelpon, which I thought was really funny. And they make it from a biopolymer that's extracted from marine algae. And the biopolymer is processed into fibers, which are then produced in the same way that like traditional tampons are. So they're like made in the same way, just out of algae. And basically, their CEO wants to make something called the Algaeverse, which is a universe of sustainable products based on seaweed. And they're saying that the idea of sustainability is in the middle of it. And they want to make the Algaeverse because seaweed is biodegradable. And not only is it biodegradable, it also takes carbon oxide out of the environment and puts
Wow.
oxygen in. So imagine instead of putting all, because people need tampons, right? The tampon industry is going to
Plants.
be what? The tampon industry is going to be massive. That's why there's a lot of plastic going into production. Imagine if you put all that money into seaweed. Not only would they be biodegradable, they're also like cleaning up the environment while being made after being used. Actually, I don't know about that one, but they do clean up the earth. And not only that, they got women to test this product, and they said that because it, first of all, it doesn't need the plastic applicator anymore, because seaweed is, oh, I don't actually know how this works, but the seaweed is slimy, so you don't even need the applicator. So it just got rid of the need for plastic. This thing is like plastic. It's completely biodegradable. It's sustainable, and I think more people should be talking about this because it's so cool.
That is so creative. It sounds like a Shark Tank pitch. Seaweed tampons. I would never have ever thought of that before. It sounds weird,
It
but
does sound strange.
slimy, I think, put me off a little bit. But I really like what they're doing because
The words they used were slimy and silky, if that makes it better.
that does make it better. Yeah, I think that out of everything that I use in my everyday life, menstrual products is probably the one that I don't think about because it's like I have to use this. There's no way that I can be environmentally friendly
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing else for me to use, right? So I love that they're thinking out of the box there
Mm-hmm.
and thinking of something that's definitely been adding to our
Mm-hmm.
waste. I love that.
Exactly. It's not like women are saying, I want to kill the planet when I'm on my period. They just don't have another option. So I hope the algae verse the best. I don't know what else they are planning to add, but I'm excited for the launches.
I'd love some seaweed pads.
I wonder if this is in development.
I hope so.
If they add this to Walmart, we can do a second Walmart vlog.
I'd love that.
Well, that wraps up our 6 Women's History Month highlights, and it's the 13th when we're recording this. Women's History Month, not over, not even half over. And recognizing women, never over, not over after this month. So keep your eye out and send us anything interesting.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you for catching up with us about March.
Bye, everyone.